All right, everyone. We've got a fair number of folks dialed in here tonight, and I think we are ready to get started. So I am Renee Casterline with Siskiyou Land Trust, and I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us here tonight. We are so grateful to be together with you in our virtual environment. What I'm going to do right now is give you an idea of how the evening will go. We have a mix tonight of some live presentation and pre-recorded presentation. And what I wanted to let you know is that we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So for those of you who are with us on Zoom, you can use the chat feature at any point to put in a question that we will address at the end of the presentation. And if any of you are watching us live on Facebook, we are monitoring that feed as well. So if you have a question, you can post it to the Facebook stream. And so now what I'm going to do is turn it over to all of the technical things that need to happen exactly right for our introduction to begin.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rod Mears, President of the Siskiyou Land Trust, and I'd like to welcome you to our 2020 virtual annual meeting. It'd be great if we could be joining you in person for this, but of course that isn't possible right now. Instead, we have several messages from members of the SLT board and staff, and we look forward to actually seeing you in person and passing along more information about work that SLT has been doing at a more appropriate time in the future. To start things off, here's a message from Steve Bullock, one of our longtime board members.
This is Steve from the Siskiyou Land Trust Board of Directors. It occurred to me the other night as we were speaking about the content of this report to you, the people who make Siskiyou Land Trust what it is, the issues that have come up around an intense period of expansion coinciding with a period of economic contraction. And it's often our job to stick our necks out, to say yes to projects which don't necessarily have a clear path to completion or success. And as we were having that conversation, it occurred to me that this poem by Goethe speaks to that beautifully. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from that decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance, which no one could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do it or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it.
Thank you. I have to say to you guys that I love that poem. Steve has shared it with us a couple of times in meetings, and as Kim gets our next video piece loaded up, I just want to read those last lines to you again. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now, which really speaks to where we are as Siskiyou Land Trust right now. Kim, whenever you're ready, we'll go to our next video from Rod.
Since you won't be hearing from everyone tonight, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the rest of the SLT board and staff. First, our Vice President, Dorinda Thompson. Dorinda joined the board in 2017, and in addition to being a valuable board member, Dorinda's considering doing a conservation easement on her property. David Tucker joined the board in 2016 after retiring here from the Bay Area after a career in finance, and has been our treasurer since 2017. Gareth Plank joined the board at the beginning of 2019. He's one of the landowners for the first conservation easements completed by SLT in Siskiyou County. Gareth also serves as chair of the acquisition committee. Stacy Smith is our longest serving board member. She's been on the board for more than 10 years, serving as secretary for a long portion of it, but has recently stepped down from that role. And last but certainly not least is Steve Bullock, who you just heard from. Steve's our second longest serving board member. He was chair of the outreach committee for many years and is now a valued member of the acquisition committee and the SLT staff. Kathleen Hitt has been our conservation director for more than 10 years. It's always amazed all of us how much Kathleen is able to get done as just one person. But there's a limit to everything. And the fact of the matter is there's just so much stuff going on that Kathleen needed some help. Fortunately, we've been able to get her some help with new hires and expanding the roles of some of our existing staff. Renee Casterline joined SLT in 2015 as a contractor and then became our executive director in 2017. Renee has always been involved in a lot of what SLT is doing, but recently she's become much more active in helping out with some of the conservation easements that we have in the works. Laura Bradley joined us in 2016 as an administrative assistant, but I'm happy to say that this year her role expanded to include work on stewardship and helping out with baseline reports for some of our conservation easement projects. Ed Stanton joined SLT this year as a conservation project manager. We were very fortunate in being able to bring him on after receiving a capacity building grant from the Department of Conservation. And finally, Kim Solga. Kim has been doing work for SLT for years as a volunteer and a contractor, but we've recently made things more official. Kim will be joining us as an employee beginning in January as outreach coordinator. And SLT is very lucky to have all of them.
Right. Thanks for that introduction, Rod. I don't know about those of you out there, but I feel pretty amazed. Earlier this year, we counted ourselves as a staff of 3, and now we get to count ourselves as a staff of 5. And there is just so much excitement in this organization, so much growth, and so many amazing people to work with. One of the things that we want to do tonight is not only share with you where we are now and what we're working on, but also where we are looking to and the vision ahead. So you're going to hear from a number of people tonight who will share about that. And we're going to start off with a message from Steve.
Wow, what a year we've had. These are exciting days for your local land trust. We sincerely hope that none of you are suffering and understand that almost everyone is challenged. When COVID struck and the economic shock first hit us, I instinctually contracted. Others in our SLT circle, who knew more about what was in place than I, countered my fearful concerns with information that resources had been appropriated for the coming years that could actually enable us to do a large amount of conservation work. Simultaneously, many compelling projects came into our awareness, resulting in a truly carpe diem moment. Inspired once again by Kathleen and Gareth, we, our board and staff, found our counterintuitive path, expansion in the midst of economic contraction. As in Goethe's poem, Until One is Committed, we unified in agreement that circumstances dictated the pathway open before us. We hired Ed Stanton and Kim Solga to greatly help the task at hand. The small business-minded amongst us sucked it in and moved forward with a smile. Doors continue to open. This flies in the face of the silver linings of healing that often happen when we slow down. My journey in SLT in my retirement from business has enabled me to sink down deeper into my feelings for the earth and for community. The depth of my appreciation and gratitude for these essential gifts of life has grown into a strong desire to give back to the earth, to the wilderness, and to my community, which have all given so much to me. My COVID life, coupled with retirement, have supported this new depth of feelings for everything local. One of the essential qualities of the Siskiyou Land Trust is our adherence to staying politically neutral. This has reinforced my apolitical leanings and led me to a basic recognition of my love for win-win outcomes. In the extremely polarized country we find ourselves in, this neutral ground enabled deep listening and deep connection with everyone around. An underlying unity is now more important than ever. One of my greatest joys in being a member of the Lands Acquisition Committee has been meeting the ranching community. What a blessing to discover my beliefs and biases about ranchers were totally erroneous. I quickly grew into a deep admiration and understanding of their lives and their devotion to protection of their land. This was such a pleasant surprise, and many unfounded judgments were quickly dissolved to our mutual benefit.
You know, as we sit here tonight in this virtual environment and I get to look at the list of people who are joined in with us this evening, we don't have that sense of community that we would if we were all joined together for an in-person meeting. But even still, that being the case, the Land Trust and our work, as much as it's about land, it's also about people. And it is just delightful to be here with you tonight and to get to hear other people's perspectives. So Steve, I really appreciate you sharing that piece and your long dedication to the Land Trust. So now what we're going to do is move into a little bit of sharing from Rod. And before we get that video up, I just want to remind you that if you do have any questions or comments that you want to share, go ahead and use the chat box, and we'll take a look at those when we wrap up our presentation. So now we'll hear from Rod.
To state the obvious, it's been a challenging year for all of us, and SLT is no exception. We had to cancel our annual slideshow series, our annual summer solstice dinner, and our fundraising has taken a huge hit this year. But that doesn't mean we've stopped doing the critical work that makes the Siskiyou Land Trust the amazing organization it is. Right now, our staff is busy working on trying to close 3 conservation easements by the end of the year. There have been many years in the history of the Siskiyou Land Trust that we didn't close any conservation easements. In fact, more often than not. They're extremely complicated long-term projects. So I want to emphasize that closing 3 of them in 1 year is an amazing feat. We have an ongoing joke between board and staff referencing the fact that there are 3 8-hour periods in a day to get things done. It's meant to be a joke, but right now I think they're using at least a couple of them. I'm going to let some of the others you'll hear from in a minute talk more about current projects and what we've been able to accomplish despite what has been a difficult year. But I'm just going to say, it's been a lot.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Rod. I have to tell you guys, when I was watching Rod's videos earlier today, I was cracking up at the dry humor, which I really appreciate. So now it is time for me to share with you about the projects that we are working on and that we have been working on over the course of this year. So let me get my technology working. All right. So we are reporting on our fiscal year, our 2019-2020 fiscal year. So the Wherrit Rainbow Ridge ownership, that goes back to the very end of 2019 when the Land Trust took ownership of the property that Thamar had left for the Land Trust to steward. The property also has a conservation easement on it held by CAL FIRE. And in these first few months that we have owned this property, we've really been spending time getting to know those 600 acres of timbered property that's outside of Mount Shasta. Part of that has been getting to look at beautiful wildflowers, but a lot of it has been spending time on that landscape and really contemplating the stewardship of it for wildlife, for the resilience of the forest community that was so important to Thamar. We've been doing some work on the buildings as well, and spending time on the property. Let's see. Also, earlier this year, we worked on another long-term project. The Thompson Creek conservation easement is a project that Kathleen has been in conversation with the Nature Conservancy for, I think, close to a decade for this piece of property right on Thompson Creek where it flows into the Klamath River. And this year, the project moved forward in that a conservation easement was placed on the property as a conservation buyer came in and purchased it. So we have some local conservation-minded folks who bought these 66 acres out on Thompson Creek who have done work out on the property and were able to get through the fires out there with the property in pretty good shape. We've also done a lot of growing in more than one way this year. Growing in the garden at the Garden Greenway in Mount Shasta was something that we were committed to because that garden project, the food that's grown there supports the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Shasta. And we also have a partnership with Bear Wallow Herbs who are growing medicinal plants. And those products that come from those plants go back out into the community and contribute to its health. And I want to say that this growing in the garden, Jane Seeley is here in this photo. Jane is the heart behind the garden and really inspired us all to get out, do some socially distanced work days early on and get things growing. And then she spent her time during the summer keeping an eye on the garden and taking anything that we harvested there over to the Boys and Girls Club so that it could be used by them when they were in session or sent home to their member families. So it was really great for us that we were able to keep the garden flourishing even during COVID and with the challenges that it presented. We grew in another way this year. Rod's already mentioned it. We brought on new staff, and at the very beginning of August, we were able to bring on Ed Stanton, who we've worked with in the past and are super excited to have him on the Land Trust staff now. He is working on the Department of Conservation Capacity Building Grant, which has a focus on developing agricultural conservation easement projects. So Ed has been out on the land, visiting with landowners, having conversations, and really looking for those projects that will come forward next. Rod mentioned big projects and a lot of projects at once. And the three now that I want to close with are the EcoTrust Forest Management projects on Wildcat and Whiskey. Between the two of them and with the third project, the Bouvier Ranch that we're working on with Western Rivers Conservancy, Siskiyou Land Trust is taking a huge leap ahead in terms of the number of acres that we hold conservation easements on. And that really translates into stewardship in working with those landowners to ensure that the future management out on those lands is true to the terms in the conservation easements. And those are lengthy documents, but the heart of it is that these landowners, their partner organizations, because there is a lot of restoration work going on out on these properties, and the Land Trust as a partner as well, we're all committed to seeing these lands managed in a way that protects these amazing conservation values that are out there. The big picture here of the meadow, that is the French Creek Meadow on the Wildcat property. And this spring, when Laura Bradley and I were out taking photos for the baseline condition report to document the condition of the property, we stopped at that meadow every time we had a chance. And the Wildcat property also gets up pretty high in elevation. It abuts the Russian wilderness and includes a trailhead to Sugar Lake, which is part of that Miracle Mile with that amazing conifer diversity. And there's just so much out there that makes it an amazing landscape. To the north of that, the Whiskey Block is also got some just amazing characteristics, and that's what brings it forward as a project and has made it successful. Here we are on, I want to say, Kidder Creek, And that's one of the really neat parts about these projects. They're protecting streams that are critical to the health, not only of salmon, but of all of the communities, whether they be wildlife or human, over on the western side of the Scott Valley and those streams that feed the Scott River. So really amazing to get to spend time out on these lands this year and really appreciate this immense landscape and the beauty of it that we have here in Siskiyou County. Bouvier Ranch, this project with Western Rivers Conservancy, is another really sweet example of people working together for the health of the whole system. So this conservation easement will protect these working forest lands as well as this agricultural envelope that we can see a little bit of in the bottom of this picture. And then the Bouvier Ranch is critical. Its position on the South Fork of the Scott River provides important cold water and habitat for salmon. So they're all really amazing projects. And if you all keep your fingers crossed and share with us positive thoughts, the Bouvier Ranch conservation easement could close any day now. And the Wildcat and Whiskey conservation easement projects are on track to close by the end of this year. So it is an amazing, exciting time for us at Siskiyou Land Trust, and really excited to be able to share with you just a few photos to communicate how important and how beautiful these lands are, that you help support these projects by being a land trust supporter, and that happens in a lot of different ways. So I want to say thank you to you from my perspective of getting to spend time out on the land this spring to really see these places and to appreciate all of the people who are working to restore and protect them. It's an amazing thing. So now with that, we are going to move on to the next segment of the evening.
Hi, I'm David Tucker, and I'm the treasurer with the Siskiyou Land Trust. I've been in this role for 4 years. Today, I'd like to go over our FY20 financial performance. Fiscal 20 ended on June 30th, 2020. Let's take a look at the expenses. As you can see on the graph, expenses were $193,300 in FY20. That's a 12% increase over FY19. That increase was generated by two primary sources. One is that we started providing health insurance for our full-time employees, and two, one employee who was working part-time in FY19 converted back to full-time status. The revenue story is much more interesting. You'll see two bars for revenue in FY20. The bar on the far right represents our revenue performance, including Thamar Wherrit's very generous $566,000 bequest to the Land Trust. This bequest has two primary components. One includes 600 acres of land, plus a dwelling and a cottage. In addition, there's a very sizable investment portfolio. That investment portfolio will be used as a stewardship fund to preserve the 600 acres in perpetuity. Therefore, that investment portfolio will not be used for operational expenses like salaries, healthcare, travel, etc. Without Thamar's generous gift, we would have generated a little over $196,000 in revenue, which is 72% higher than FY19 and $10,000 lower than FY18. You may recall FY19 was a very thin year on the revenue side because we didn't close any easements, nor do we have any special programs like the Patagonia Moose Jaw program we had. But there's even more to talk about. You remember this slide from last year? We said we're ready to grow. Well, we've been doing just that through your very generous support. From the land that we own standpoint, we increased from about 80 acres to over 680 acres, thanks to Thamar's very generous gift. But we have a bigger story to tell you about with the land that we have under conservation easements. By the end of FY20, we had a little bit over 6,900 acres under conservation easements. In FY21, we expect that to grow by 423% to over 29,000 acres. Your generous support is what funded this expansion. And we expect even more in the coming fiscal years. We're currently working on closing these 29,000 acres, and we have 10,000 additional acres queued up to work on in FY21. So we really appreciate the support you've given us over the years, and we hope that you'll be able to continue to help us as we protect the land you love. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a bunch, David. Don't you guys love that graph with the really tall, big, steep growth arrow? I love that graph. And it is a really exciting time for the Land Trust. And your support does mean a lot to us. We're going to hear some more now from Rod. And then we've got a video I'm really excited for you to see. So we will shift over and hear from Rod again.
Thanks to David for that. I mentioned earlier that our fundraising has taken a huge hit this year. Giving Tuesday was a notable exception, and I want to thank everyone listening that helped make that happen. We had relatively low expectations, given everything that's happened this year, and not only did we surpass those, but with your help, we beat the number that was in our budget by more than $7,000. Of course, in addition to donations for things like Giving Tuesday, there are a number of ways you can help support the Siskiyou Land Trust. At the 2018 annual meeting, we announced the creation of our endowment fund, and at last year's meeting, we announced our goal to grow that fund to $5 million by the end of 2025. I'm happy to say that if all goes according to plan, we'll have made our first million by the end of the year. Some of that comes from our existing stewardship funds raised since SLT started doing conservation easements. Some of it comes from the generous donation made by the estate of Thamar Wherrit that David mentioned, and a large portion will be coming from stewardship contributions on conservation easements expected to close by the end of the year. The intent of our endowment funds is to spend only the earnings on the money invested. This will allow us to fund the organization for the long term. In addition to our fixed operational expenses, the expense involved in creating a conservation easement can be substantial. Then we have annual expenses for the monitoring of the easement, and we expect that some of these expenses for the larger easements we're creating to be considerable. Conservation easements last forever, so we need long-term funding. Now, with the success that SLT has had working with EcoTrust Forest Management and others to create several large conservation easements, comes more demand. We're now looking at several more opportunities that have been presented because of what we've been able to do. Meanwhile, it seems like we just got caught up on our staffing levels, but now we have the opportunity to grow even more, in a big way. It's a wonderful, exciting, awe-inspiring, and in some ways, scary time. I'm going to let Gareth talk more about that because he's better at it than I am. But it suffices to say that we're going to need your support more than ever. With that, I'm going to hand things off to Steve again with a message about another way to support the Siskiyou Land Trust, with special guest appearance by former SLT President Sam Baxter.
My years serving on the board in my late 60s and 70s have seen some significant maturation. Better late than never. My natural instincts and desires to give back have reemerged, stronger than ever. Estate planning has been in my consciousness for the last decade or so. The term planned giving, for those of you who may not know, refers to gifting a portion of whatever assets remain at the end of one's life to those people or organizations who do good work for the planet and its inhabitants. They are the ones who have earned our admiration and support. Of course, our children, grandchildren, and family, for most of us, do come first. In my unique circumstances, I chose to create a charitable remainder trust, naming SLT as one of the beneficiaries. And there are much simpler ways to engage in planned giving, such as the path of Sam Baxter.
All right, Sam. What was
Hi,
it?
Steve.
What was it that inspired you to name Siskiyou Land Trust as part of your estate?
That's a good question because the estate was being revised, and about the time we were doing that locally, you, Steve Bullock, brought up at the Land Trust board meetings planned giving. I didn't quite know what planned giving was. I read about it in magazines like the Smithsonian, the AARP, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. So I checked it out and realized it would be a good thing for our estate. And Chris and I talked about it and said, what would benefit us the most in terms of a good feeling about donating money? We've always had the think globally and act locally mentality. So we chose the Land Trust because of what they do, how they do it, and the people that do it for them. And many of you know them, and they are fantastic people. So it was a kind of an easy discussion for the Baxter family to put it in the Baxter family estate.
Well, thanks. Thanks for sharing, Sam.
All right, Steve.
In conclusion, planned giving, while it does require significant forethought, arrives in its own time. There are a growing number of our friends and neighbors who have made that decision, some of whom have made it public. Sam Baxter, Thamar Wherrit, John and Susie Brennan, and Sean Tom Shepto are among them. Others have informed us that they would prefer to remain anonymous. My encouragement is to pay close attention to your deepest feelings about our home environment and our community here in Siskiyou County. If our work at SLT inspires you, consider remembering us in your estate. If there is any particular way in which you would like to have that gift used, simply name those directions in your document. If and when that occurs, please do contact us to let us know of your decision. And thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, Sam. Thank you for all of the years you spent with the Land Trust and the ways that you are still connected. It is about community, and we are grateful for all of you. And Steve and Sam just talked about looking ahead. Now we're going to talk about that some more. Gareth Plank, the chair of our Lands Committee, is going to share with you a little bit about the Land Trust vision. Go ahead, Gareth.
Hi, thank you, Renee. And it's always great when you get to talk after everybody's done a spectacular job, and following Sam and Rod and David's and Stephen's wonderful comments. They've pretty much said everything that I can say, and we just will want to remind you that we live in an area with unparalleled beauty and opportunities to make sure that that beauty and vast, wide open spaces, and of course my pup behind the door crying to come in right now to join this exciting meeting. But this is unparalleled times that we have where one part of the world is turned upside down. We're meeting on Zoom. We're not getting face to face. We have political turmoil, but this is part of the most important time for us to be doing wonderful things and sharing the beauty of this world. And the gentleman who is the Western Regional Director for National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Jonathan Birdsong, sums it up best when he refers to Siskiyou County. It has the most to lose and the most to gain. And when we stop and we take a moment and think about that, we understand that Siskiyou County today might not always be that of our dreams and why we moved here or why we elect to live here today. And so we do have the most to gain, and let's make sure we focus on the most to gain. And an organization like Siskiyou Land Trust is uniquely positioned to make sure that those wonderful gains do exist. One of the things that we are looking at in Siskiyou Land Trust is not just the land, but when we talk about hiring people such as Ed Stanton joining us and trying to grow the organization by expanding the roles of folks like Laura and Kim, we have a lot of incredible talent in Siskiyou County, and we have a lot of incredible needs within the land trust. So within these expanding opportunities to grow our landscape, it was only 20 years ago Siskiyou Land Trust had 70 acres under conservation easement. Now, by the end of next year, we'll be close to 30,000. With that comes additional responsibilities. And we are looking forward to being able to hire young and bright people to work with Siskiyou Land Trust, that we can help nourish this ongoing effort that the Land Trust has been conducting for the last 2 decades, and make sure that we have the mentoring in place for the next generation. So this is a time for us to be celebrating and to be looking at the willing landowners that have shared their landscapes with us for future generations, with the agencies that have helped put this together, and of course our fabulous staff and the work from the board. But most importantly has been, and I know as a landowner that is part of this land trust with a conservation easement on our family ranches for 10 years, it is you, the community, and the supporters and the members of Siskiyou Land Trust that have made all this magic happen. So just 4 cheers, 10 cheers, 50 cheers, whatever the number would be, or cheers to all of you for your great support and efforts. And because of that, we get to look forward and look back at the same time, 70 acres to 30,000 acres, and think of those vast landscapes out there that we can be preserving for future generations. With your help, we will do it and look forward to it. And with this, we get to turn it over to Kathleen, who will really bring it to the best summation of all the wonderful things at this land trust. Thank you again for all of your generous support.
All right, thanks so much, Gareth. So we are going to hear from Kathleen twice. First, we have a video, and then we'll hear from her live.
Hi, sending well wishes from Siskiyou Land Trust staff. I am Kathleen Hitt, Conservation Director. It's been an amazing 10 years so far for me working with this great organization, and I just really wanted to reach out and let you all know that so many projects are on the way to the finish line this year and early into next year, both forest conservation easements and agricultural conservation easements. We have really taken a big leap these last couple of years, and we are growing in some pretty extraordinary ways. We're realizing at this point in time that we really have begun to step into the fullness of the vision that our founders had for us almost a little more than 25 years ago. And as we do this, we are just so deeply thankful for all who have brought us this far, our project partners, landowners, funders, community supporters, volunteers, kind of everyone that we have named, and so many who often don't, get recognized on a daily basis. We're an organization of let's go for it. Let's try it, because who else will? If we don't try, we don't know what we can succeed. And there is something positive going on in the world right now, and we are all a part of that. And that is leaving a legacy for Siskiyou County that supports these working forests, these working ranches, wild spaces, of everything in between, recognizing that we are so blessed to live in this place. So just want to really thank you all for being with us, for supporting Siskiyou Land Trust and this great work that we all do together, and say good night, be well, take care, know you are in our hearts. We look forward to being out there on the landscape with you in the near future and being in touch.
I have to tell you before we hear from Kathleen that initially when we were planning our annual meeting, we were so busy closing projects that we didn't know if we would be here with you or if we would be simply sharing recorded clips. And so Kathleen had put something together for us, but she is here with us this evening. And she and I were having a conversation earlier today about the context of this work that we do and the vision and the legacy. And I'm always inspired to hear Kathleen speak. And so and now we'll all get a dose of inspiration. Kathleen, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. It is fantastic to be together in this virtual space and all spaces that we can honor the work that we do collectively. I'd like to highlight a couple of things in closing to wrap up the threads that have been shared tonight by board members and staff. We are at an aha moment, at a really interesting space of growth. And with that growth comes quite a lot of introspection and checking in, making sure we are staying true to course and true to the roots of the land trust, as well as reaching for that possibility and that potential. And the way we've really been able to do that, and it's showing up right now, as we're closing several conservation easements, 3 this year, 2 more ag easements soon, as well as looking at property acquisitions and partnerships. Really, we're leveraging our capacity internally and with our project partners. We could not have gotten this far without folks like EcoTrust Forest Management, who we're partnering with on these vast forest conservation easements that abut the Russian wilderness and the Marble Mountain wilderness. Their staff made it possible for us to be able to accept these easements because they gave so much of their time to make these projects move forward. And the same is said for Western Rivers Conservancy. The way we could take this amount of work on with a local organization is because we had these folks invest in us in this local conversation for the long term. And that's no small thing. We had, almost a dozen folks from outside organizations. Fish and Wildlife Service is a new partner as well, looking to acquire property to protect the Wairika flocks. So as we expand with our staff, we're also learning how to expand with leveraging our partnerships. And with those leveraging of partnerships and those stewardship dollars that come in for that long-term horizon of care and stewardship, we're learning how to leverage those dollars to break open, really to step into the fullness of, I think, the vision of the land trust. And a really exciting time to ask ourselves, what do we need? And so we're at this place of checking in, going, oh my gosh, as we brought Ed Stanton on, we had the aha moment of wanting to hire just about every person that we brought in for interviews, and thought, oh my gosh, as this time of COVID's hitting, as the economy is going down in so many realms, we need to step it up, because what we do matters. It matters now, as we can see, and it is not going to matter any less in the future. It's going to be even more imperative. So the inspiration of our partnerships and our success really spurs us on to that next chapter of Siskiyou Land Trust, and really honoring all those who came before all of us in this particular meeting, and many who are in this meeting, to say, wow, thank you for helping us weave this vision. I think we are wanting to stay true to that, both having elements of local places that we can touch with public access or some kind of stewardship invitation access, and these large landscapes that we're weaving together, from wilderness boundaries through forests, down through the ag lands, and places in between. And so to kind of cap that, I want to share that we're looking at entering into a bit of planning for the land trust strategically, looking at how do we weave together this headwaters region that is extraordinary for its biological resources, our communities, and just the spirit of resilience and enthusiasm and inspiration that we find in this place. We love all of our partners and the work we do. So just in closing, I want to say thank you and encourage just continued inspiration as we collectively find ways to partner, to be outside, to be together, and to celebrate this work we do. It is lasting work and oftentimes really nitty gritty work. You know, as we're talking about these big acres, we all know listening that this is just so many hours and so many partnerships. And I'll share that I'm really touched and enthusiastic by the response we've had from both our partners and funders. I've seen folks in the state of California really have a shift. Our funders were, you know, even the ones supporting our conservation easements, folks in those agencies 10 years ago were not so certain that conservation easements were such a great idea. And we've seen a turnaround to this current day where the support is extraordinary, and the funders we have for our projects, both acquisition of land, stewardship projects, and acquisition of easements, they keep bugging me and saying, when can you all grow and do more? Because we're really excited about what you're doing. And that is so heartwarming to hear. And I think I'll leave us with this thought for the night. I heard the other day driving back from a project site that the world is looking to conserve 30% of the earth by 2030. And so if we take that to heart, what does that look like for Siskiyou County? What does it look like for 30% of our landscape beyond the public lands to be conserved? I think that's the direction we're headed. And what does it look like by 2050? In terms of growing support for that, we're looking at growing an endowment to $5 million in the next 5 years. I'd love to see it be a $25 million endowment by 2030, so we can actually leverage our resources, our inspiration, and our momentum now to get there. Gareth made a point when meeting with some folks earlier today that, you know, the smallest trajectory or the smallest difference in trajectory can be a huge variant in an outcome. And so how can we set our trajectory today to have the most extraordinary outcome for Siskiyou County tomorrow? That's what we're trying to do here. So cheers to all of us, and cheers to actually some positive news for 2020.
Thank you, Kathleen. Don't you guys love it? So much vision, so much passion in this organization and in the people who are part of this organization. So it is great to be here with you all. And I am taking a look over in the chat, which the first couple of things that came up are, you know, pretty standard for Land Trust. We've got Sam Baxter telling Gareth to let the dog in, and it looks like the dog made it. So fun stuff at home. My dog's not out the door yet, but there is a comment here that I want to read. There are some things coming in. So from Daniel DeKimpe, focus is easements, where it was one-off, but Kathleen discussed possible acquisitions with public access. If correct, would SLT own and provide access or collaborate with an organization that already specializes in this activity? There are several. Both easements and public access require some deep expertise. Daniel, that is certainly true. So the question there is, are we looking at projects that would include public access? I'll start off on that, and then what we want to take this opportunity is, you know, for any board or staff to weigh in. And, you know, Wherrit is a great example of a question of public access. There had been a practice of Friends of Thamars accessing that property, and there certainly seems to be an association with the land trust that if we own property, it is open to the public, which as we take on the Wherrit ownership is not as straightforward and simple as the ownership of Siskiyou Meadow, which is intended for public access. So as the organization grows and as we have different projects come forward, that question of public access is one that we are considering and really considering on an individual project basis. Kathleen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I'd say as we, yes, exactly to what Renee just shared. And for some properties, such as the Wherrit property, which we now call Forest House in Thamar's honor, sometimes when you are gifted a property, it really helps to get to know it, to understand what the neighbors' needs are, what the land trust needs are, what the place's needs are, and really have an opportunity to get to know the landscape, to figure out, you know, is this a stewardship relationship with guests coming? So public access, we've realized, is not just two words with one meaning. It has a broad spectrum. And so we're getting to understand that as we get to know some landscapes that we've inherited. And I'd say other lands are clearly acquired for the purpose of partnering with a trail association for meadow restoration for public access. And so that is an ongoing inquiry and exploration, and each landscape has its own considerations.
All right, thanks, Kathleen. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat to see if we have anything else that comes up. What I do see is a comment from Dave Powers, who says, "Thank you so much, SLT. You all rock." And I want you all to know that Dave Powers is one of the amazing team members at EcoTrust Forest Management who is making so much happen. So Dave, I just want to say you guys all rock too. And it's been a pleasure to work with you on these projects. So taking a look at the chat, folks, I don't see any other questions coming in. I see more love from Sam Baxter. Sam, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And we really appreciate all of you being here and joining us tonight. To wrap things up for this evening, it's been great to be able to share with you not only what we have been working on, but that these things that guide our vision and the way that we move forward. We are working really hard to wrap up these 3 projects that we talked about tonight. And at the same time, we are out on the landscape looking at new potential projects, meeting with partners, meeting with new partners to talk about opportunities in Siskiyou County for land conservation, looking at restoration in critical areas, and really keeping an ear to the ground for what this county needs, what communities and landowners are interested in as they look at the places that they love and ask themselves about the long-term health of those lands. So pretty amazing stuff. We're so excited to be doing the work that we're doing. We are going to amazing places that we can't tell you anything about right now. But you know, soon in the future, we'll have some new projects that we can share with you. So with that, Kathleen, did you want to say anything else to wrap up the evening?
Really just thank you. And I think one more element perhaps to respond a bit more fully to the question of ownership. While the land trust really does focus on conservation easements, as is obvious by that trajectory, we've recognized that land ownership takes more investment of funds for long-term stewardship. And so as we grow in strategic planning, as we grow our stewardship funds and other endowment funds, we feel like we'll be more prepared and able to take on ownership in a different way. And so just to put that out there, ownership of public places takes such a degree of coordination that a small land trust we have these smaller landscapes that we own in town where we are able to access them easily. And so that's an exciting question and something that is definitely on our minds too. And so thanks for asking it. And I'd say stay tuned and help us envision the means to really get there and do that thoughtfully, because we don't want to own land that we don't manage well. That's why we're taking time with the Forest House to really get to know it, to make sure our management of that place is really thoughtful. And so, yeah, and look forward to engaging with more partners in that realm and in leveraging capacity. So thanks.
All right, folks. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for our virtual annual meeting and for the support that you give this organization throughout the year. Big thank you to all of you. North State Giving Tuesday, like David said, or maybe it was Rod said, exceeded our expectations. And we really appreciate your support and the ways that you do that throughout the year. So thanks so much for joining us. We are recording. We have recorded this presentation. We'll be sharing it on our social media and through email. So if you want to pass it on to anyone, please do. And to all of you out there, have a lovely evening. Thank you for being here.
Good night.
Good night.